Hey everyone, welcome to episode 4 of the Cricket Podcast by Wicky. I think we've changed the title a few times and still haven't landed on the proper one. But we'll get into it, guys. We're going to cover the women's Ashes, which Sushane will be able to talk a lot more about than I would, and the men's Ashes, where we'd both be able to talk about it, but I'm probably going to talk way too much. Sushane, you want to do a quick intro if anyone hasn't heard this podcast before?
Hi, if you're listening to the pod for the first time or the second time or the third time, okay, we're running out of episodes now, so I'm just going to assume that everyone who's watching this hasn't listened to more than 3 episodes of the show. Hi, I'm Sashen. I'm part of the team at Wiki. Um, you've probably interacted with me at some point, either on the Wiki Discord or somewhere on social media, and now you get to see me, and now you get to hear me talk about cricket on this show. Oh, I
Yeah.
also just wanted to say that this is episode 5. I realized
Is
that
it?
yeah, four was the one we did at the end of last week, previewing the women's Ashes.
Ooh, all right, okay. Well, this is a contentious point of debate already. But
Yeah.
it's cool. I was actually going to say, like, I think for a lot of the people that engage with our Twitter, like, it's funny because most of it is probably like sensible banter by you, and it'll be odd. There'll be like the odd ridiculous comment, and that is probably me. Just to be really clear, I know we don't really break things up. Most of the bullshit commentary probably comes from me, and a lot of the like actual knowledgeable discussion probably comes from Sushi, depending on what time of the day it is and what sport we're talking
you
about as
you
well.
you yeah, you're giving me way too much credit about the insightful commentary thing, by the way. Like I I'm as much into the memes and into the silly comments as anybody else.
Now, also, okay, well, look, there's a lot to go through. We've got the first men's Ashes test, and we've got, well, like the preview. Oh, sorry, a very quick recap of the first test, a very quick preview of the second test for the men's, and then a recap of the only test for the women's Ashes. And I think I was asking you the other day. I'd love to. I think it'd be cool to do a really quick recap of or preview of, sorry, the rest of the women's Ashes. So we'll get into all of that, guys. Last week when we did the podcast, I was telling Sashane that it's cool to sort of kick this off with you, like Sashane and I doing this, but going forward, we would love to have other guests on as well. So I've just locked in our first one. So we'll introduce who that is very soon. But yeah, a couple of really interesting people that we're going to have jumping on the podcast in the next couple of weeks. So it won't just be me and Shane just talking about, I guess, relatively similar stuff most episodes. But look, before we get into everything, I think let's look. We could do this either way, but let's get into the men's Ashes first, very quickly, and then we'll dip into like a review of the women's Ashes test. In terms of the
Yep.
men's Ashes, just before this, I was having lunch and watching. It was Michael Vaughan and Mark Waugh on like some Fox Sports preview, and it was basically like
Mhm.
20 minutes of Vaughan just try to, like talk shit and Mark Waugh losing his mind listening to it, which is amazing. I absolutely love Mark Waugh, which might sound weird because I think a lot of people think think differently, but it's just so
You know,
entertaining.
when I sort of edit this pod later, I'm going to cut out that little audio section of you saying I love Mark Waugh and just
Oh, I do. I genuinely do. Like I think
yeah,
like, oh, I loved him as a player. I think everyone would have loved him as a
yeah,
player, but I think a lot of people like the best was when he was the selector, like some of the decisions he made. But from my point of view, I'm like, if someone's in the commentary box, I don't know, everyone's different, but like I want them to be entertaining. Like for them to be knowledgeable would help, but you can't say
yep,
he's not entertaining. Some of the stuff that he talks about, especially in the BBL. But anyway, um,
yep.
let's get into it. So with the Ashes, I think we recapped obviously how the first test went. I think in the last one from memory.
Yes.
But going into the second test, look, my prediction before the Ashes was that look, I said England would win 4-1, but that was just to be a little bit out there. Like I did genuinely think England would win the Ashes. I
They
thought
can still win 4-1, you know. I mean,
they can, but I don't think it'll happen that way now. I think 3-2 is more likely now. But like, okay,
yeah,
so what I love, let's just quickly go into the narrative because I'm all about narrative, right? So I think narrative wise, I think England played the way that everyone expected them to play. Baseball, yeah, whatever, right? Australia, I don't see how they played any differently to how anyone would have expected them to play. Um,
yep.
the pitch was flat. Both teams batted. I'm just trying to think now, but like the test played out. like pretty much as most people would have expected it to play out. The big shock for me was how it ended, obviously, with Australia having that
Mm,
really good partnership and obviously going 1-0 up in the series. I think going forward with the next 4 games, if the pitches are as flat as this one, Australia plays in Australia with flat decks and it will suit them. That's not a shock to anyone. So if they do that
mm,
again, like my faith in English cricket will have forever been, yeah,
love it. Yeah.
it'll be horrendous. But if the ball moves,
So,
if the ball
right.
moves, England will win 3-2 or 4-1. I'm putting it out there again. That's it. I'll stop
Cool.
now. Go ahead.
Cool. Okay. Yeah. So you might actually get your wish. We've had, as always happens. So we're recording this the day before the start of the second test, and as it always happens, the pitch photos do the rounds on social media a couple of days
Oh,
before.
it's
We've
so
had a first look
green.
at the Lord's pitch, and it looks really, really green. So maybe we're going to see a completely different surface in the second test than we did in the first. And that's really going to test our predictions. I think that's really going to test the 4-1, the 3-2. Will
Yeah.
Australia collapse when the ball moves? That kind of thing. Which should be fun. It's giving us something different. I think that's the really interesting thing. I just don't want to see more. Like as
Yeah,
fun as that finish was, I feel like I don't know. It's good to have different surfaces. Just it'll just add to the spectacle, I think.
yeah, 100%. Like, I don't actually think why anyone was surprised. Like, look, as I've said multiple times in this podcast, in Australia, like, I'm as passionate of a cricket fan as you can get, but without time zone and with, like, cable TV and all that kind of stuff, like, we just don't get to watch that much cricket, unfortunately, in Australia. But I still, like, I literally was staying up till 4 a.m. for the games and stuff. Like, I will do what I can do in the big sort of test series and stuff, right? But I just don't see why anyone would be surprised. Like, I think the first test pretty much went to script. It's just that you would have thought that Spieth and Labuschagne would have gotten the runs, except for,
Mm,
well, was it? Oh my god, now I forgot it. Who got the runs in the first innings? I know it was Kawaja. Okay,
Tahlia,
cool. Yeah, so like, yeah, different people got the runs or
Gary.
whatever, but nothing surprises me really with how the first test went. I'll just be shocked and pissed off if the rest of the pitches are similar. That's all. Because I just think like
Okay.
with
Yeah.
like I don't expect the pitch to be what it looked like in those photos, but as long as the ball moves, and I'll say this before the series, hopefully Mark Wood plays. I just think like the
Mm,
problem, sorry, as long as the pitches are relatively green and they obviously there's some movement for the bowlers, I'm so confident with England because I think the thing that I was worried
mm,
about with England is because when I was watching funnily enough, I was in Europe last summer when baseball kicked off, so I was actually able to watch a
yep.
lot of the cricket. Um,
Yep.
but when I was watching it, it was so one thing that concerned me was like you need one or two big partnerships. Like even with
Yeah.
baseball and attacking cricket, you still can't have like you just can't keep depending on like streaky hundreds against Australia's bowling attack. And the way
Hmm.
that England had like different people contribute. I think I was saying this to you in the last podcast or the one before, where I thought the
Yeah.
top order of England just needs to get like good looking 30s and 40s because like
Mm,
Root, Bairstow, who is it? Yeah, Root, Bairstow, like the two that I was kind of
Stokes.
confident, and Pope actually and Stokes. Like yeah, like the middle order, someone like Root
Yep.
most likely will have to get a ton, and
Root.
a couple
Yeah.
of the other guys will get that like sort of 60 to 80 or 90 score. So I was
Yeah.
confident in that happening. You just need the top
Yeah.
order to like go hard, and I think they can
Mm,
again. But God, Mark Wood needs to play. Like,
mm.
what do you reckon? Like, do you reckon he'll play? I think we discussed this earlier as well. Like, how many tests do you reckon Wood can play given his body, and how much do you reckon they'll let him play?
He'll probably play two. I think the timing of those tests will be also really important. If they do think he's the trump card, like he's the guy who can win you the game,
Yep,
they'll want to use him at critical points in the series. Uh, I don't see the point in playing him if you're like 3-0 down. I mean, I'm sure he'll play, but
100%.
I'm sure he would play in that scenario if he's not played in the first three tests, just to rotate the other quicks. But um, like yeah, I can't really see a scenario where England would have let it get to 3-0 before they play Markwood. They would have
Mm,
played it at played him at
True.
1-0 down or 2-0 down to just ensure, because if they have that much faith in his match winning capabilities, that's why I think we could see him sooner rather than later.
Mm.
Um, I know is he in the squad for the first two tests? I know that
Oh God, tell me he's in
they've
the
named
squad.
squads. Yeah,
Okay,
I
but
they've named him.
while
He
you
is in the
check
squad.
that, oh thank
He
God.
is in the
Okay,
squad.
okay.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Oh,
Yeah.
that would have killed me. That honestly would have killed me if you told me who. Because I think, like, okay, with the benefit of hindsight, um, like I don't really like. I don't necessarily think Ollie Robinson is as bad as the Aussie media is making out to be. But I also, the thing with Ollie Robinson is he would need movement. Like from what I've seen of him, he seems like a younger, more experienced Stuart Broad in that he can, nibble the ball around and he's not necessarily going to hit 140. So if he's just like broad light, like why would you play him on a flat deck?
Hmm.
Like surely you look at the pitch and you realize, oh shit, this is flat. I would have loved for England to go. Wood needs time between games and play him in
Yep.
test 1, 3, and 5. But I
Yep.
also understand if Robinson is highly respected by the squad, that you kind of want to go with your best bowling attack in the first test. So
Hmm.
I genuinely hope he plays tests say 2 and 4, and then if the
Hmm.
Ashes is on the line and he's being really really good and consistent, then you can play him in the fifth.
Hmm.
Or if the Ashes is over, or if he hasn't been great, or if he's got a niggle, then you don't play him in the fifth. But to not play him in the first two
Yep.
tests and then expect
Yeah.
him to like change everything in the third would be a bit much. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The one guy I do want to see play for England at Lords is Chris Wokes. He's very, very good there. That's quite well known. Surprised he didn't play there against Ireland. Slightly surprised, but especially considering how well he bowled against Ireland in the 2019 Lords Test. Um, he's
And
he,
he can
he
bat as
he's
well.
Yeah, his inclusion is just a slam dunk, just he can bat, he can bowl, he does really well at Lords. And I don't think England will really have to choose between Wood and Wokes, because they could possibly rotate out two fast bowlers quite easily, one of Broad or Anderson and Robinson possibly. In fact, they might go with four quicks if, let's say, Moeen's finger doesn't recover in time and they decide that, you know what, it's okay, Root can bowl our spin and we can play four quicks. So
And I'd love that.
there's definitely room in the 11 for all these guys. And I think, like, what's really interesting to me is England's response, which we'll see tomorrow. Um, I'm sure they've budgeted for at least one defeat in this Ashes going into the series. I'm sure
Mm.
they probably thought that, it will go wrong at some point, right?
Yep.
And that is fine. Like, let's just accept this as a byproduct of the process, and that we will lose a game. We might even lose two games, but, like, does that substantially change their plans heading into the second test? That's what I'd be really keen to see.
Yeah,
um
I
that's
think it's funny you say budget for a loss. Like I think you're giving, like, I think you're giving cricketers and cricket coaching squads too much credit there. But no, I think it's a
Yeah.
really good point you raise, and I think also like everything coming out of the English squad with McCullum and Stokes. Look, it suits everything that I love about leadership and coaching. So like I'm
Hmm.
obviously biased here, but I think like they the Aussie media is paying it out, and I love that because the thing about the Aussie media is like they just don't understand cricket on a global scale. Like they understand what goes on in the Aussie summer, and they understand Australian cricket, but like what Stokes and McCullum and even Robinson, like what they're generally saying is right. Like they should be happy with the way that Australia played. I don't.
Yep.
Maybe one of them said this. I don't think that England should have expected Australia to play similar to Bazball because England's playing like
Yep.
that. And I think
Yep.
even them saying that, I don't think they believe that. I think that's just something that they're saying in the media. But what I like about
Hmm.
what they said is it does feel like a win. It doesn't feel like a win, but it also shouldn't feel like a loss because like the
Yep.
test overall like went to a certain script where it looked like England was going to win. And then yeah, there was a really good
Hmm.
partnership at the end that got Australia over the line. But like everything looks really good. You get a bit of movement from that pitch, and I guarantee you Warner's not getting more than 30 or 40 runs in the test. Like it's just my prediction of he won't
Yeah.
play the fourth test is still live. It's still live. I've got
Yeah.
faith.
Still
But
I'm holding
anyways,
on to that
yeah.
hope. Yeah. The reason I mentioned the reaction to a defeat thing is uh that's not true for every team in world cricket at all.
Yeah.
In India are the classic example of panicking and making outlandish team selections after they lose a game, especially when they think they might lose the series.
Mm.
And it's
Look,
provided a lot of
it's
entertainment
also
over the years.
no. Look, I
Yeah.
get that, right? But it's also sorry. Like the other part of it is that this is a match one of a 5 game series. Like I do actually
Hmm.
understand. Like for example, like if India goes to South Africa, for example, and this is say 2 or 4 or 6 years ago, right? If India goes to South Africa and lose the first test, but it's a 3 game series, there's not necessarily
Yep.
reason to panic, but there is reason to like actually take some action based off that and change
Hmm.
something because you have to,
Hmm.
right? But with a 5 game
Yep.
series and you knowing that you will most likely get 5 results with the style of play that you have, I think
Yep.
it makes sense for England to be composed. It makes sense for England to say, hey, like this has
Yeah.
worked. And like it
Yeah.
basically did it did work in this game. We just didn't get the result. So I'm all on board
Hmm.
in terms of the mentality and the thought process.
Yeah.
And you do have time. You have 4 more test matches to win 3
Yeah.
of the next 4. So yeah.
Yeah. But my point is, it's just far from a given, right? That the reaction will be measured, calm, composed, sensible, and I think we'll find out the answer to that question tomorrow. That's what I'm.
Mm.
That's what I.
Well, I'm looking at
That's
the
what I'm
time.
saying. I really want to see. Yeah.
Yeah, it's 1 day and 6 hours away from the first ball. So time of recording. But anyways, I
One
think we
more
can
sleep. One more sleep until the Ashes. Yep.
one more sleep till there's 4 nights of very little sleep for us Aussies at
Yep.
least.
Exactly.
But all
Exactly.
right, well, we could talk about basketball the whole episode, but let's move on to Australia. I think the main point
Yep.
to like look, their batting just really impressive. Like you just got to say that,
Hmm.
yeah, really good team effort with the bat. We spoke a lot about Australia last time with the bat. Let's have a quick chat about their bowling or their fast bowler rotation. Do you think they'll make any changes?
That's the question that's on everyone's mind. Like, will Starc play? Will Starc play at Lords? Um, I was looking this up before we started recording in the prep for the show.
Yeah.
I was surprised to know that Stark's only ever played one test at Lords in his life, which is interesting given how much. I mean, given that they play 5 tests in England each time.
Well,
He didn't do too much in
mm,
that game, but he's actually done very well at Lords in ODIs in white ball cricket.
nice.
So that is the ground that he has happy memories of. Let's
Mm,
see what it's like. I know that there's this temptation that you shouldn't play Stark because he's just going to leak runs and like England will just feast on that all day long.
yeah.
But yeah, I mean he actually took 4 wickets in the World Test Championship final, if you can believe that. Um, he made runs in that game as well, which was
Were
very
they all
important.
just tailored wickets? Because I don't remember him getting many top order wickets in that game. I'm pretty sure he cleaned up the
Well, there
tail.
was I was just going to say that well, Kohli was the top order wicket, but let's just include him in the tail end wickets.
Was that the fake catch?
Yeah, it was the one that like sort of really climbed on Kohli.
Oh no, sorry, that was legit. Okay, my bad. Okay, well we'll give that one to the pitch
Yeah,
then.
yeah,
No,
and
I'm just
yeah, you're right though. He did get a few bowlers in that game. He got Umesh, he got Siraj, he got uh somebody else who was also
Yeah,
in
I
the middle.
think from memory, was it the second innings where he just cleaned up the tail? I'm
Uh,
pretty sure.
yes, yes,
Yeah,
yes.
he got
He
at least
definitely
two
got
late wickets. Because
he definitely yeah exactly. He definitely got Umesh in the second innings. That much I remember.
yep,
Yeah.
yep. I reckon Stark will be interesting. I think it's an interesting one with Stark where like because Australia is only going to pick the 3 main tweaks. Cummins, there's no way he's leaving the side. Um, an interesting one would be Hazelwood out for Stark, I
Mm.
reckon. Not based on performance, but based off the fact that he's had such little cricket in the last couple of years.
Yep.
I think like the thing that I respect about this current Aussie team is that like they're sensible. And I think like it makes like there's no way in hell Hazelwood's going to play 5 tests. It's
Yep.
either they'll rest him or he'll get injured. There's no way he can do that given how his body's been over the last couple of years. And it's gonna be he's not gonna say, "Hey, rest me," but like from
Yep.
like sports science, coaching, all that kind of point of view, there's just no way he's playing 5 tests. So it might be
Hmm.
good for them to almost like identify. To be honest, but there's been an 8 day break, so that's another aspect, I guess, or like a 9 day break, I guess, since he last
Yeah.
bowled. So I think it might be a
They
case
can
of
choose when to rest him later in the series when the turnaround is
yes,
much
the back
faster.
to back. Exactly, yeah. So like let him play these 2 tests in a row, get his body up and going, and then you can almost choose who to rest for the next
Hmm.
one. And I think they'll also
Yeah.
notice that they won the game. I think it's funny, like I don't think Australia should be getting as much credit as they will or they have been for the win.
Hmm.
I think it was like both teams played their game, both teams played well. And like as I told you, like I hate betting on. Well, I basically don't bet on cricket. But if I was a betting man on this test match, I would 100% be betting on England because the game,
Yeah.
like as I keep saying, there was no surprises. Australia got the result. If the pitch
Hmm.
is somewhat going to be moving around, then I reckon like it brings England back into it. So I think yeah. Anyways, like I think Australia have a heightened like
Hmm.
a sense of their own achievement after that first game. And I think if anything,
Okay.
that probably means that they go in with the same side. And I think that
Yeah.
honestly, that'll play into England's favor. Like
Is that
that'll actually help England.
is is that wishful thinking that they might believe their own hype?
Look, I actually think maybe I'm basing it off the media, but I actually think the Australian players are being like truthful in the media. Like I think they're actually, and they should be happy that they
Okay.
won. They should be genuinely happy that they won.
Elite honesty.
Yeah. Oh God. Okay. Oh, that reminds me of multiple
Oh
days at the
man.
MCG saying that to them. Anyways, okay. Sorry. Like they
Yeah.
should be happy that they won, but I don't think.
Hmm.
I honestly think they are getting ahead of themselves in terms of like, oh, our approach was the better approach and we're the better side, all this stuff. Like you get the ball moving in the second test, and I guarantee you that it's going to be a very different game, which will be interesting to
Uh-huh.
see how it plays out.
Yeah.
That's all.
Okay. Okay. Yeah,
But
I
like,
suppose
sorry,
that's fair.
I was
And
just
that yeah, go for it. Go for it.
sorry, I was just gonna say, like, I got a little bit confused because I was about to say that it will be good for England if Australia go in with the same bowling attack because it's almost like the whole positive, like intentful batting, right? They've now
Hmm.
got a better understanding of Boland, Hazelwood, Cummins, and obviously Lyon. On a flat deck, I get all that, but it's like seeing the same bowlers again. I think that
Hmm.
benefits them. But on the flip side, Starc coming in for a Hazelwood or Boland gives you like a loose bowler to try to go at, which I think also
Hmm.
benefits England. So I think like, oh
Hmm.
man, I'm all in. I'm all in on England for one.
Yeah.
Stuff it. I'm back.
That
So
yeah. That Stark 40 in the World Test Championship final was I think that was really important for uh I don't know how to say this because obviously Stark's going to be picked as a bowler. He's not going to be picked as some kind of magical number 8 batter who can help
mm,
like who can help win the game. I say this in a week where an Australian batting at number 8 made a test 100, Annabelle Sutherland. But anyway, so, but I mean, with Stark, Stark is somebody who has justified his inclusion in the team before with his batting. Like the first 2 tests in India in 2017, they wouldn't have won that first game at Pune without him. The Smith 100 and the O'Keefe 12 for and all that, when he basically just like used his sort of long arms to reach out to the spinners and like slog
yeah,
sweep them for six. So he's actually somebody who's had practice staying in the side because of his runs. Like I don't think that's necessarily good enough to keep him in the side for the Ashes, of course, given that uh, he's going to be picked as a bowler. But I think it does help his case generally, especially with the
mm,
runs in the World Test Championship final. Especially if he replaces Boland in the course of the sort of natural rotation of the quicks, um, or Hazelwood, in fact. So he's a much better bat than both of them. Um, he'd probably bat much higher up. And I think with him, Cummins and Lyon, and then suddenly when you talk about bringing back either Hazelwood or Boland, you might think, well, maybe I'm going to leave out I'm going to bring in the guy who was left out for the other of Hazelwood or Boland, if that makes sense.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah,
if Boland
yep.
was dropped, yeah, if Boland was dropped, I'd bring in Hazelwood for Boland, not for Stark.
Yep.
I'm sort of keen to see if that sort of continues throughout the rest of the uh, throughout the rest of the series.
Yep.
Starks had those moments with the bat. Let me say he's not like some amazing all rounder
He's not
who batted
consistent,
like
and I
six or
think
seven.
like
Yeah.
if you're an Aussie
Mm.
fan, you'd almost be like frustrated that like you see Stark at like a 99 in Test match cricket and a couple of other like really good, solid, and like he can hit
Mm.
the ball, but it's almost like you know how powerful of a hitter he is, but then he goes into some innings just trying to block and then just feebly gets out, and then there's some innings where he just like you almost want him to just go for a hit more often, knowing that like
Mm.
Cummins has the patience and the technique if he wants to hang around, but he can also hit. Whereas like Lyon can only slog, and Hazelwood is a number 12, really. But anyways, I think just I love like the
Hazel,
like
you're
teams.
telling me you don't like Hazelwood's poke into the offside and run?
Oh man, yeah, legitimate number 12. But
Didn't Hazelwood and Lyon almost win a test for Australia against India at Adelaide once? They were the last wicket. This is 2018, I think.
mm,
This is the last wicket, and they were like
nah, couldn't have been
India should have won
2018.
that much earlier.
Oh,
Yeah, India should have won that much earlier than they eventually did. But then Hazelwood and Lyon got a
mm.
partnership going, and then like India were panicking and
I think
you
I'm
could like
yeah.
in Kohli's celebration of the last wicket, you could see the kind of relief mixed in with the ecstasy. It was like,
Yep.
thank God they're out, and thank God we didn't throw this away.
I'm showing my age here because I was at that game and I was there the morning that India won, but I don't remember this partnership. I'm just trying to think because I remember celebrating the win. But you're right. Was it
Mm.
on the morning? Like it was the final morning, the fifth morning?
I
Or was it
think
the
it was
end
the
of day
final morning.
four?
Yeah,
Okay, well, whatever it was, I think I kind of see what you're saying because I do remember that same sense of relief actually. Now that because
yeah,
we were in Adelaide and it was like in
yeah.
Australia, obviously like beer is a big part of Test cricket, so it's a long
Yep.
4 or 5 days, and at the end of it all,
Mm.
I think it was more it is. I remember that sense of relief, but um, I think
Mm.
there's an unlimited amount of things we could talk about. There's the
Yep.
selections, the pitch, the tactics,
Mm.
but
Um, just a couple of
sorry.
things I have in my notes that I wanted to bring up with this. So
Yep.
England lost the first test with Australia chasing. Well, I'm really keen to see what would happen if Australia bat first because I think that makes immediately makes Smith much more of a threat.
Mm.
He is like a massively like dominant in the first innings. He's kind of like Sehwag in that. Oh my God, has anyone ever made the Smiths to Sehwag comparison?
I've never heard that before,
But
but I love it.
yeah, but yeah, he's somebody who's obviously like very like the earlier in the test match days, the bigger a threat Smith is. So that's something that I'm like, as much as you could say that England had their moments in the first test, and there were many things that they did right, and Root batted well, and then Broad was really good, and this and that, etc., etc. I am actually really keen to see but I do feel like some of that was because Smith and Labuschagne didn't really do anything.
Mm.
And I'm kind of really keen to see how England stand up to the challenge if it's the first innings and if it's the phase of game where Smith is
Oh my god,
like at his strongest, like I'm really keen to see how that plays out.
I'm
Like
not keen at
this
all to
is
see that.
this is
I've seen that enough.
this this was a very strong Australia because you had the contribution shared around. Kerry made runs, Khwaja made runs, Lyon got 8 wickets. There was a last wicket part. There was a uh, penultimate wicket partnership between the two bowlers. But I kind of wonder that if England would face Australia in the strongest form, and strongest form means Smith making runs, batting time, tiring them out in the field, making a big 100. That's something I'm very keen to see how England cope with. You know,
I'm very keen to see that maybe later in the series, not now, please.
yeah,
I think from like a game point of view, a serious point of view, we
yeah,
need a pitch with some movement. We need a pitch with, well, we need a
mm,
team with Mark Wood, and we need
mm,
a relative, like not a comfortable England win, but like like a 50 run or like a 4 wicket, whatever England
mm.
win, chasing Bazball wins throughout, one
Like a
all, and
validation of
then
their approach. Yeah.
yes, a 1 all, and then this will be like nothing
Mm,
will ever overtake '05, at least for me personally. But we just
yeah.
want something like on par with that, to like, because I think I can definitely tell you, like in Australia, I do not know if anyone knows that the Ashes is on. Like well, maybe just no one like, or I don't know that many people, unfortunately, that watch cricket as much as me. But like, there's a bit about it in the media. It's like almost like they want to talk about the storyline and the drama.
Mm,
Like they'll pay out England for Bazball, or they'll make a joke out of Ollie Robinson, or they'll talk on talkback radio. Michael Clark will say something, but I don't know if
mm,
anyone's like watching the games. But this is why, like, I think I'm gonna go on a tangent here, but in '05 there was that thing around like paid TV. I think they made it
mm,
paid just after or just before, and like interest in cricket spiked because of the '05. Actually brought relevance back to the game. Honestly, in Australia, it's like that. Like you have the big bash when you get the families going along to the games and stuff because that's how they want to drive into
mm.
cricket. And then you've got guys like me
Yep.
who are 25, 30, 35 plus that still have some interest in sort of the old school test cricket or whatever, but it's just really hard to make cricket relevant in this generation. And I think, like, the big Ashes series, the big India Australia, like the big three playing each other in these 4 or 5 test matches, if they're one sided or if they're boring, it genuinely hurts cricket. So I think
Mm,
I'm making this about everything else except for the game now, but yeah, I think one
mm.
all sets it up perfectly.
Yeah. It's funny because we're actually maybe the sort of peak is just past, like we're just past that peak, but the last so maybe not the last 3 or 4 years, but certainly the last 5, 6, maybe even 7 years. So basically the post uh the sort of post England India, no, sorry, the post England South Africa India, when those were the three best sides in Test cricket, the post that era. So the post Virat Kohli era captaincy, which is like
Yeah,
2015 and onwards, like we've seen some incredible Test cricket in this era, uh, like among non-big three sides. Like the quality
yeah.
of the Test cricket that's been on show has been incredibly exciting, and like some of my best memories of watching Test cricket in this time have involved like non-big three teams. Obviously, there have been great tests among like involving these teams, Brisbane, Headingley, Edgbaston, those kinds of games. Like that's obviously all there,
Mm.
but um, there's been a lot of like great test cricket played outside the big three in this particular
Yeah.
era. New Zealand, Sri Lanka, South Africa, Pakistan, West Indies. They've all been involved in some great matches. Yeah.
Mm. I think the problem is, and like we'll change topic after this, but I think the
Yep.
problem is, and the great cricketer like make jokes about this all the time, but it's like, at least in Australia, I know that if it doesn't happen in our time zone, or look,
Yeah.
honestly, if it doesn't happen in
Yeah.
Australia in the Aussie summer, no one will know. And if it
Hmm.
happens in our time zone, like maybe in India or something, then people might even
Yeah.
know what happens. But it's just like, I think like I'm so big on obviously cricket as a sport and like long term and all that. So for me, it's like India is one country where I know people watch a lot of cricket from a lot of different teams, and obviously the time zone
Hmm.
helps, and cable TV being so prevalent helps. But I know
Hmm.
that like in most countries now, it's like it has to be these big series because no one will remember. Was it the
Yeah.
Kusal Mendes 150 against South Africa? Was it Kusal Mendes or get that right?
Pereira.
Pereira. Sorry. See, there you go. Like I know about that
Yeah.
innings. I've
Yeah.
heard
Yeah.
and read so much,
Exactly.
but even like the most like avid cricket fan in Australia, like didn't even know the name of the guy
Yeah.
that got the runs. Like
Oh, definitely. I mean,
that's
yeah. I
how
mean,
crazy it is.
it's yeah. Like my point is merely just like a quality thing, not an
I
interest
know,
thing.
I
I know
know,
the
I
interest
know.
thing is
Yeah.
much harder. Yeah. Like that's a much harder sort of thing to sort of get past. Yeah, okay.
Cool.
um
Well, look, let's move
that's
on to the women's test because I was saying to you that
yes.
like I wasn't able to watch much of it, but because we were talking about it and because you helped me understand some of the context behind the game and what was going on, I was actually following the score almost the whole time, and it was cool to
Nice.
see it actually get close. Like I know the flat
Yes.
pitch didn't help early on, and but day 4 and 5 seemed like they were riveting. So yeah, tell us more about
Hmm.
the test.
Yes, I think like the biggest uh it's maybe just something that this is like, I mean, there's a whole story to be told about how this relates, how all women's tests are necessarily burdened with like this expectation about doing something for women's chess in general, like how each individual game is supposed to make a case for the a case for the wider format, which is like pressure that it should not carry, honestly. But it is true that
But it
games like
does.
this do prove. Yeah, I mean, it's just like it's true that the one of the big wins that has come out of this game is that 5-day tests have got their ultimate validation, which is we finally got a result, which is a big thing. And it was possible only because it was 5 days long. And yeah, it's just like that was, I think, the biggest win. In addition to it being a great game full of great individual performances, Sophie Eccleston took 10 wickets, which is amazing to
I
see.
think you called
One
that,
of my
right? Or
favorite.
like you were excited to watch her, or
I'm always excited about Sophie Eccleston, but and not really. I didn't predict the specifics of a dominant bowling performance. I think it's funny, right? Because le- Australia have actually dealt quite well with Eccleston in the past.
Hmm.
In the 2022 World Cup, they played Eccleston twice, once in the league phase, once in the final. And one of the big reasons why England haven't really been able to sort of get past Australia is because Australia have really effectively neutralized their best spinner, which is like a big thing, right? I mean, and so for her to get these 10 wickets is um, it's a big deal to get them against Australia. Like it's an opponent who got the best of her in the past in big games, but here she
Hmm.
turns up and gets 10 wickets. That was just fantastic. Annabelle
Nice.
Sutherland, who I mentioned earlier, made 100 for number 8. She's actually somebody who she's an interesting one because there's pretty much only one spot in that team for a bowling or like a seam bowling all round, a bowling all rounder who bowls seam. Let me put it that way. I
Yeah,
think
yeah,
that's
yeah, yeah.
the clearest way to express what I mean. And so she's sort of taken Nicola Carey's spot over the last. I mean, that's the one spot that I think Nicola Carey had maybe a couple of years ago. Sutherland has that now, and they clearly have a lot of faith in Sutherland because she's like opened the batting in the women's big bash and those kinds of things. And like here, you saw her actually getting a Test 100 at number 8, which was really cool. Beaumont made a double 100, which was great to see. Danny Wyatt played really well, I thought. Certainly better than I expected for her. I'm gonna come out and say that it was a very encouraging start for Phoebe Litchfield, who I was so full of praise for in the last episode. Uh, it's like I was really hoping she could sort of go ahead and get at least a 50, if not 100. But it's a very encouraging start. Um, but now Australia have won.
Oh, sorry,
And
one question. I was just gonna
yeah,
say while you were rattling off all the individual performances, I was gonna say, from what I remember of Ash Gardner, she's an off spinner, right?
yes.
Is she a first choice off spinner or is she a part-time off spinner?
She's an all-rounder, so she bats
Yeah.
in the top six. So and
Okay.
everybody in
So
that top six bowls apart from
would
Healy.
you say
So
she's more of like a Nathan Lyon? Like, is she like the main spinner for the team, or is she like a Joe Root who's a good part-timer?
no, I'd say she's closer to Lyon than she is to Root.
Oh, cool. Okay, sure.
Because she's definitely not a part timer. It's also because I think because that team has so many all rounders because so many of them bowl and they bat so deep. Um,
Right.
they actually have the luxury of picking the spinners by type rather than like
Ah,
this is
cool.
the only good spinner we have, so they are our first choice spinner and we need to strengthen the batting because we can't play all round. Like that's not a
Yeah.
problem for Australia. That has never been.
Wow.
Um, and like they have the luxury of picking the spinners by type, so they know that we can go into a team with a left arm spinner, an off spinner, and a leg spinner, and not compromise our batting. And
Yep.
Ash Gardner is key to achieving that. Somebody who's like a genuine all rounder who bats, who's the main off spinner. So like she's like a key finger spin threat, and is a very important sort of part of the team with the bat.
Nice.
So it's more like it's more like the variety of threats that they can put forward rather than
Right.
the relative importance of that spinner in the scheme of things.
Right, because with my limited knowledge of like, I know, like, look, I've improved a lot in the last year or two. Like, I know most of the names. I know most of like whether a player is a batsman or a bowler, but like whether they bat or they bowl, and their roles. But I didn't know whether Gardner was a bowler or like a part timer, right? And when I saw, like, I checked the score the next morning or whenever it was, and I saw that she got 8 for. I thought it was like, oh my god, a part timer just rocked up and got an 8 for to win the test. But I'm
Yeah,
glad to hear that she's
definitely not a
yeah,
part timer.
finished off.
Yeah,
Okay, fair enough, fair enough.
yeah.
Okay, sweet. Well, what does this mean for the rest of the? Because just remind us again about the structure of the rest of the Ashes and like what would
Yes.
England need to do to win it from here?
Yeah, so that leads us into like a really interesting discussion that I had some notes on. So Australia have won, which means they're 4 points ahead in the multi-format series. So points accrued across the different formats, like the different types of games played across the entire tour, decide who wins the Ashes. The test match is worth 4 points, which Australia have got now. And the points used to be, because there's so many tests were drawn before, the points used to be shared, right? So it was like the test match
I
ended up
get
being a
you.
stalemate, so it ended up being decided by white ball games. But now the test has a decisive uh, role in shaping the outcome of the Ashes. Um,
Nice.
Now, England pretty much need to beat Australia across the 6 white ball games by a big enough margin, 3 ODIs and 3 T20s. So I think they're going to
Like 2-1,
Birmingham
2-1.
today. Uh, how many will they need to beat them by? They'll need to beat them by more than that margin of 4 points. Basically, they need to overcome the 4 point margin first, which they are now trailing by because they lost the test match, and they
Right,
need
right.
to obviously like get at least one more than that, right?
Cool.
And I think points are shared in the case of a no result. Um, yeah. So they're going to play 3 ODIs and 3 T20s. They start with the ODIs on Saturday. I think they're going to Birmingham today, and they'll set up for the first T20 at Edgbaston on Saturday. So we could have a day four of the men's Ashes test and like the
Ooh.
first T20 of the women's Ashes on the Saturday. So that's a pretty big
Uh,
day.
as soon as I
Uh,
said ooh, I said because we limited overs games would start later in the day, wouldn't they? They'd be like late
yeah,
night
yeah,
our
it'll
time.
start much later. Yeah,
But given like I
yeah.
think Saturday night. Yeah, okay, cool. Because I might have to bloody stay up and watch the games because I can't record it. So as much as I said, I might
Hmm,
have the women's in the background and put the like. Well, it is. I'll be playing both
hmm.
games. Hopefully, we'll see.
Yeah. So the thing with England is um, I'm not so confident they'll be able to get like they'll be able to beat Australia by enough of a margin across the 6 white ball games because like you can say that like they're 4 points behind so they need to win this many games. Australia probably won't lose that many games to give you enough of an advantage. So even if uh, like it's tough, right? Which is I look at the end of that test match and I think uh, heading into that fourth innings, could England have chased it? Like I think at one point in Australia, in the third innings of the game, it was setting up to be one of those third innings collapses. 450 plays, 150 plays, win by 8 wickets. Like one of those, like as it usually happens when it's sort of flat for the first few days and it breaks up later in the game.
Mm.
Um, and maybe England could have chased it. Um, but I mean, maybe you could say that was unlikely because they were batting like last and the pitch was breaking up, etc. But I think the more interesting question is they might have been more inclined to chase it because, like, it seems weird to say this, but they were actually not that far away from a win in the Canberra Test in the last Ashes.
Mm.
Um, um, India have drawn with Australia in a Test match in
So you're basically
2021.
saying like Australia are a dominant white ball team, but England thought maybe because both teams don't play that many tests, you almost like
Exactly. Yeah.
can test yourself against them in the longer format because of both teams'
Yeah.
inexperience.
Yeah, it's weird, right? Because we won't really say that an upset is more
Of
likely in a test
course.
match.
Mm.
Like you wouldn't say that a minnow could beat like a favored team in a test match because you think that it'll count over 5 days, like the quality will count over 5 days, but it's more likely in a
Mm.
T20. But I'm not so sure about England in the Ashes. I mean, in fact, they might have been more inclined to try for a win. Um, if they only had like 200, 220 to chase, not only because they'd get 4 points, but also because they wouldn't be quite sure that they could beat Australia by a big enough margin over the 6 white ball games in
Mm.
order to actually win the Ashes,
Yeah.
which is
Ooh,
obviously that should be their goal. Yeah.
quick
I
question.
also feel
Quick
like they
question.
lost it by the end of day four, when they were 5 wickets down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Quick question for next time. Do you not think it makes more sense to go like T20s one day and then test to finish with everything on the line? Or no? Or what if everything's like
Mm,
what if the series is over kind of thing?
it's already decided. Yeah. Then you're kind of ruining the test because the team who's ahead just needs to play for the draw.
Maybe like yeah, I'm just thinking like maybe we could kind of have it in the middle where you go like if the T20s have the least points, play them first, put the test in the middle as like the big like kind of deciding factor, and then the ODIs at the end. Maybe I don't know. It would just be nice to see like um I don't know. Maybe it didn't make as much sense. You're right about that because if you put the test last, one team plays for a draw. I get that as well. That's fair.
And I mean, you're kind of, yeah, I mean, yeah, but Okay, yeah. Just sorry, lost my train of thought. I was going to say something about
Yeah,
about the
yeah.
point system, but yeah, I don't mind starting with the test. I like that. I think that was good fun. Plus with the white ball games.
Oh, I think there's nothing wrong with it. I was just trying to think more of like a. I assume the test is worth like more points than the limiter over
Yep.
games. Maybe like
Yep.
sandwiching it in the middle, having like if the T20s are worth
Mm,
say the least, and then ODIs, and then tests in terms of importance of points, then putting the test in the middle, I think would be really cool. But anyways, like it's just I love the whole multi. I think the Ashes is like too important. I think men's Test cricket, these big Test series of like the India Australia or like the Ashes or India Australia, it's like
mm,
there's obviously time and like the budgets can allow these big Test series, so it would be weird to combine them. But what could be really cool is like I don't think they would even bother thinking about this, but like a South Africa versus Pakistan or a I don't know, New Zealand
mm.
versus Sri Lanka, start to have it in a way where there's like every series has a point structure. How cool would that be? Like your two tests,
Yep.
3 1 days, three T20s, whatever, put a point structure behind it, and every like your the New Zealand's tour to Sri Lanka has this added context of like
Yep.
that tour's winner. Like I think that would be so cool.
Yeah.
I don't know if that
Yeah.
would
It's
be
good
like
fun. It makes for good viewing. It like
yeah.
having seen enough of these multi format series, they're great. The point
Mhm.
system, it's quite interesting. It's really cool to see. Um, like like just on the scheduling thing, this used to happen on a lot of older cricket tours where they used to mix up the games. Like there would be three ODI, like they'd play tour games, two ODIs, tour games, three ODIs, first test, second test, tour games, third test, fourth. Like it used to be all mixed up. Like this segregation of uh, a single format's games all happening at once wasn't always the case.
Mm.
The one thing that would be sort of interesting to keep an eye on, just to sort of go back to Australia for a second, is now that they have the test win in the bag. Um, so it sort of came out that Alyssa Healy had been playing the
Yeah, I
game
saw
with a
that.
couple of broken fingers, if you remember that. So I think we're still waiting on whether she'll be fit enough to play the first T20 on Saturday. But um, if she has to sit out, then we'll probably see Tahlia McGrath captain the team. Uh, the vice captain, who's the current vice captain. She had a good game in the test match as well, which is great. Should serve her well going in that. Um, and I think that's sort of like the big selection question, like just Healy's fitness, because it'll be
Mm.
Mooney and Healy opening if Healy's fit.
How the hell do you play a game less than a week after a game where you've broken two fingers? That's ridiculous.
I mean, she was playing the test match with painkillers. That's what she said. She said something very
Oh.
interesting that, like, like we tried to keep the dose of the painkillers high enough that it wouldn't affect me while I was playing the game, uh, but
Mm.
not, but not so high that like I'd be completely immune to the risk of injury. You know.
Yeah, yeah. Oh
Um,
God, that sounds so horrible. Like I get like in so many of these sports, obviously we live in Australia where there's like rugby and stuff, right? Like I get this whole conversation, but I also think after the injury's done, you just need to go back to being a normal human being and realize that you broke it two fingers.
yeah, yeah. No, I think Gardner had hurt her finger as well, if I remember correctly, and she bowled, but she said like I just had adrenaline in that moment, and
Or maybe she would have gotten all 10 if she hadn't had the hurt finger.
Oh, I'd
But
love
no,
that.
awesome. Okay, well, I think the next one of these that we do, so I'll have a chat to the one or two guests that we've spoken to and time those. But I think the next time we speak, or on this podcast, anyways, we'll have the next sort of sequence of games for the women's Ashes. The second Ashes, oh, I can't wait! It's 1 hour or 1 day, 5.5 hours now. So the second test starts. So we'll have
Yeah,
all the commentary on the second one, and the couple of guys that have said yes to doing the pod with us are pretty interesting characters as well. So it'll be good to have them on
Wicky,
as well.
Wicky.
Awesome, cool. Thanks, Shane. Well, anyways, guys, enjoy the second men's Ashes test. And what's the schedule? Sorry, it's the ODIs next for the women's Ashes.
It's the T20, so they're starting with
Ah,
the
cool.
first T20 on this Saturday. Yeah.
Nice. Okay, and there's also obviously the blast going on, and a whole bunch of other stuff. So I'm sure you guys will be very much attend the world of cricket, and we'll catch you in a week or so. Thank you.